It was really a great privilege when I was asked to pen down the history for the INA Netaji Subhash Museum. It was like a dream coming true. I think it was a very wise decision on the part of Archaeological Survey of India to convert one of the barracks in the Red Fort, a barrack where the INA trials were held between November 45 and January 1946. It was also a challenge to decide what all has to go into it, how to go, where to go, and keeping that in view, we decided on certain galleries on the ground floor, first floor and second floor of the museum. And we started the first floor with Netaji's early childhood, his education, and his coming back after submitting his resignation from the ICS. But as soon as we entered the museum, displayed there are certain objects: the chair which Netaji used in Rangoon, the sword which was presented to Netaji, plus certain badges, medals of the Azad Hind Fauj of that period. And then penning each and every word for the panels was not an easy task. A major problem was that we had not much to display in the museum. And one of the decisions I took was that there is no museum in the country which talks of Netaji's life from early childhood till his disappearance in August 1945, and also the Azad Hind Fauj, the exploits of Azad Hind Fauj, the bravery. So I decided that let me put that whole story at one place, and today I am happy that it is the only museum in the country which showcases this in totality. Some examples I'll give while planning the panels, etc. One read about 150 books on INA Netaji. Some were very, very useful. His correspondence, his speeches, certain files in the National Archives, both of INA as well as of military intelligence of that period. To go through them and then to mark what we have to use in the museum, which quote is to be given, was again very interesting and challenging, and a very learning experience also, because I was also learning a lot about Netaji and INA while going through this process. And I must say the team of researchers which I had with me, working under me, with proper guidance, they were also able to collect so much on this. The very first panel I penned was, I called it The Birth of a Nationalist. And I put in that who knew that on 23rd January 1897, when Netaji was born, that this child will one day become the President of the Indian National Congress, and not only that, will become the Prime Minister of the United Government of India, raise an army, fight the British, establish the independent government in India, and inspire millions of Indian youth to fight for their motherland. Going through this different aspects in the museum, what becomes very crucial is the letter of resignation of Netaji from ICS. He remains in a dilemma for almost 6 to 7 months. But his conviction to nationalism, his conviction to motherland is very clear. That at this age he's saying that if I accept this job, I won't be able to serve my motherland. He even refuses his father's suggestion that you accept it there and while after coming back to India you can resign. Very clear he says no. And this is the prime reason that the British were always suspicious of Subhash Chandra Bose, because no one had done that earlier, and the Britishers were shrewd enough, they could make it out that a person who's resigning, not joining the ICS, saying that he will serve the motherland and he want to serve the freedom struggle. So they knew where the threat was. And that is why, if you look at the entire history, they always wanted to keep him out of India, whether it was Mandalay, whether it was the exile to Europe twice, or when he's in here, in India, behind the bars for different reasons. We go on to show that Netaji and Rabindranath Tagore were co-travelers on the ship when he was returning from England. And this started a relationship, because I have always believed, and now there's ample proof for that, that Rabindranath Tagore was an inspiring spirit behind the revolutionaries. Let us not forget that Rash Bihari Bose, the Gadar leader, when he went from India, he went showing himself as a secretary to Rabindranath Tagore. There's a very interesting case, Hindu conspiracy case of 1918 in San Francisco, where the Gadarites are caught, and one of the Gadarites becomes an approver, and another Sardarji shoots him in the court, and this Sardarji is shot by the American police, and then they decode the Gadar correspondence in which they say that this poet is very dangerous. He was given $10,000 in US, which he gave to the Japanese Prime Minister to be distributed among the Indian revolutionaries in Southeast Asian countries. If you try to put two and two together, you will find that Rash Bihari Bose and other Indian Gadarites, they established the Indian Independence League in all those countries in Southeast Asia which had been visited by Tagore. And you have photographs now of Tagore and Rash Bihari Bose in Japan. And why I'm mentioning this is because Tagore supported Netaji till the last. During his problems with Gandhi, during his problems with Congress, when disciplinary action was taken against Netaji by the Congress, that time also, when it came to the question of Bengal, formation of coalition ministries also, that time also. And these revolutionary things, you know, they don't come out into the open. Then we show in this museum his entry back into Indian politics. He lands in Bombay, meets Gandhi, is not very much impressed by Gandhi. And the reason is given for that. Goes to Chittaranjan Das, who's his political guru now, and under his mentorship starts his political career. And one thing we saw to it, that Netaji's works as CEO of the Calcutta Municipality Corporation, his works for education, health, etc., should also be showcased in this museum, his contributions, because people hardly know only that he asked for blood and will give you independence, and his role as a fighter and all, but his constructive roles which are there. Like we have also put up that the Planning Commission of India, it was he who came up with the idea And he who made Nehru agree to head the Planning Commission of India, well, Nehru was in Europe and Nehru was reluctant at that time, but it's he who did that. So one has to look at Netaji in totality in these terms of his contributions. We have put up his different quotes of different periods, particularly highlighting the 1928 session of the Calcutta Congress, where he makes the volunteer corps. And in those volunteer corps, the people taken are ex-soldiers who had participated in the First World War, young boys, girls dressed in army uniforms, which of course was not liked by Gandhi. It was disbanded later on. His different roles and all these things. And then after Lahore and all, we have shown his differences with Gandhi also in relation to the Poon Swaraj demand, independent freedom demand, and always one step ahead than what the other congressmen were thinking. We've also shown his efforts to take everyone along with him as far as the independence struggle is concerned. And then his entire contribution when he's in Europe, what he's doing, he's not sitting there, he's going for treatment there. And what he had gained in Mandalay, he had studied Burma also very closely while he was in Mandalay. And that time only he had written a very interesting letter to Sarat saying that the British are accusing him that he's a Bolshevik. But had I been a Bolshevik, or had I wanted to be a Bolshevik, I would have taken the first vote to Europe, and I would have become a Bolshevik, but I have no such intentions to do so. So similarly, he is not a person who's sitting quiet. When he lands in Europe, he's welcomed by the Indian-Italian Youth League. Then he's asked in London to preside and deliver an address in the Indian youth. Over there, when he's not allowed in London, his presidential speech goes there. That speech is banned in India. His pamphlets can't come to India and all that. But that's the time where he developed his contacts. We showed that. We also showed his views about different European countries and what's happening in Europe during that period, particularly in relation to advent of Hitler and what his views were there on Hitler, where he never liked what was happening in Germany under fascism at that time. Then we come to him as a Congress president, both Haripura and Tripuri, and we've also shown the massive popular support Bose had at that time among the Indian people. Differences, of course, cropped up with Gandhi, and when we look back, we find that Bose was right when he was trying to make a coalition government with Prajakrishak Party in Bengal to keep the Muslim League out, which initially Gandhi agreed, and later on Gandhi asked to withdraw that kind of action, which Bose had called suicidal for Bengal, and which even Tagore called suicidal for Bengal. And later on, a lot of complications. In spite of all disciplinary actions against Bose by the Congress leadership at the headquarters, he is re-elected Congress president in Bengal, gives his own program, and then the Congress disbands the Bengal Congress, and something else comes up. We go up to Ramgarh, formation of the Forward Bloc, Anti-Compromise Convention, and then we show his arrest again. While showing his arrests in different parts of time, we have also shown that how in the jail he was treated, what he was thinking, who was meeting him, how he was celebrating Durga Puja in jail, how relations were meeting him, and his views about whatever political events were taking place during that period. Then he goes on. A very crucial thing is 39, when the war starts. He's in Chennai that day. And the moment he hears the news, he says, okay, here's an opportunity for India to cash upon. And urges the Congress leadership immediately to start a movement in India. Though he has been suspended from the Congress, But in the emergency meeting of the Congress Working Committee, he is invited by Gandhi, where he very vocally states his own views in relation to fighting the British, urges Gandhi to launch a movement. Gandhi doesn't. And then after all this, forward block, Ramgarh, etc., when he is imprisoned again. At that time also he wants Gandhi to lead the movement. He is offering Gandhi all help, though he has made the forward block within the Congress. He showcased all that. We also showcased his correspondence with the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal at that time, and his threat to go for a hunger strike in the jail, which the British are quite afraid of, that if something happens to him. So he shifted to his Elgin Road residence. And that's the time Bose has started planning what the future course of action should be. Even then, he's suggesting to Gandhi to lead a movement against the British, and it appears that had Gandhi agreed to that, he would not have left the country at that time. Up to this period, we have also shown the spiritual development of Bose also, who inspired him during the youth. Swami Vivekanand, Parmanand, his school teacher Beni Madhav, and we put up there what Bose had to say about them and how they inspired him during this period. Then we show his moving out of Calcutta. And every book I was picking, I was finding the title given was The Great Escape, or I thought over it. I said it was not an escape. Escape is when you are running away from something. And here was Bose, who was not running away. He is going to start a new phase for India's independence. So why should I call it an escape? And I just called it, he left the police sleeping. That's how I put the panel over there. Gave all the description of his journey and all, right up to Peshawar, then from Peshawar to Kabul, life in Kabul, then Kabul to Moscow, and then Moscow to Berlin. They put a huge map also in one go of that whole thing. Besides who helped him, how he did it, how he escaped. And then we come to the life in Kabul. He's meeting the Italians, Cutroni, and I've also made it clear here that Bose's intentions were not to go to Germany, but his intentions were to go to Soviet Union, but the Soviets had refused him at that time, maybe at what the Indian Communist Party was saying, because the Indian Communist Party was now supporting the British in certain respects later on. Then his life in Germany, the Indian Legion and all that, which has come up, utilizing all his sources and friends which he had made in his earlier stays in Europe, his interactions and relations with the Irish leaders, and then his coming through the submarine to Japan. But what is crucial, as we have tried to highlight in the submarine journey, is that it is not just that he is enclosed in that small submarine for 3 months and all that, but his thought process during the journey. Every moment he is thinking. Hussain is taking notes, what to be done. And it was during this journey the idea of having an all-women force emerged from Netaji. In the modern sense, we can say the first modern women army organized by INA and organized on Netaji's behalf, and this is what he did the first time when he went to Singapore and Bangkok, he appeals. And then we have shown the Azad Hind Sarkar, the various components of Azad Hind Sarkar, its actions, how it functioned, who were all involved in it, every people's name, Then we come to the INA, starting from its formation by Mohan Singh. In between we have described the political condition in Southeast Asia also, and then entire INA's operations, battles, the contributions of the people of Indian origin over there, how heavily they contributed their everything for Azad Hind Fauj and country's liberation. And we end the museum ultimately with saying that Netaji disappeared. And then we show the trials at INA and a little bit of what impact all this had on the polity of that period during this whole thing in the museum, 3 floors. So I find it will be useful not only as for visitors, younger generation and all, even the students are liking it. And I'm told that the number of visitors to Red Fort, which used to be 1,500 to 2,000, has gone something like 6,000 to 8,000 per day, and plus something like 15,000 on weekends. So that's where I feel that the museum has been a great success.